Joe Burrow holds the top
Powered by
three
Riverside
spots as
FM.
far as Cincinnati Bengals go. In fact, last year was his best season. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and I'm back looking at another team from the AFC, specifically the AFC North. We're on the third place team, the Cincinnati Bengals. We've already covered the first two teams, the Ravens and the Steelers, and now we're moving to the Bengals. If you want to hear the podcast for those other games, just go back and look at my previous podcasts. All right. So the Bengals finished the season just above 500 with a record of 9 wins, 8 losses. At home, they were 3-5. On the road, they were 6-3, which isn't bad. But in the division, they were also 3-3. Very tough division, and it's going to be the same way this coming season. So how do the Bengal players of 2024 stand in relation to the greatest Bengal players of all time? That's what we're going to find out right now in this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So as usual, we'll begin with the coaches. The winningest coach for the Cincinnati Bengals is Marvin Lewis. He's got 131 wins. He's by far the leader. Sam Weiss is second. Paul Brown is third. And then Zach Taylor, the current coach, is fourth with 46. So long ways before he catches Marvin Lewis. Now the NFL has made a decision to begin adding stats from a league that they had not included in the past. So that might change Paul Brown, who's currently third with 55 wins. That's going to change somehow. So next year, when I repeat this podcast, Paul Brown could have a different total than 55. We'll just have to see how the NFL incorporates these stats from this other league. They're going to incorporate them right in, but when they do it and exactly how they do it, how they verify the stats from this other league will be something interesting. So I don't know when this will take place. But that will be that will be a podcast coming up where I just talk about this new ruling and a couple other things involving the stats. But yeah, so Marvin Lewis, 131 wins. Really, nobody's near the wins all time. All right, let's look at the offense, and we'll start with the career passing yards. So this is interesting. Ken Anderson, 1971 to 1986, has 32,838 yards passing. Andy Dalton, 2011 to 2019, had 31,594. So Joe Burrow, current quarterback, has just over 19,000. It's very possible he'll pass Carson Palmer, who's currently in fourth with 22,694. So hopefully Joe Burrow stays with the Cincinnati Bengals. If you're a fan of the Bengals, you definitely want that. He's a great quarterback, MVP candidate, and likely possibly could have won or should have won, but that's another story. But yeah, he's fifth all time with the Cincinnati Bengals and should be able to move into fourth this year, barring any type of injury. None of those players are anywhere near the top 10 as far as overall yards. So let's look at passing TDs for the Cincinnati Bengals. Andy Dalton actually has the most with 204. Ken Anderson second with 197. And Joe Burrow has 140. So again, he's probably going to pass Carson Palmer to move into fourth. Carson Palmer has 154. So I'm fairly positive that Burrow will get more than 14, especially considering he had 43 last season. He'd have to get 47 to move into third. So that is not impossible, as It has happened, but we'll see. But yeah, he's moving up the list quickly as far as touchdowns go. Joe Burrow is, that is. And again, no one near the all-time lead. Dan Marino's seventh with players that have 400 or more. He's in seventh with 420. So really, Andy Dalton with 204 is a long ways to go. All right, let's look at interceptions thrown. Now that goes to Ken Anderson, which figures when the older a player has been on this team in the previous years, more likely he will lead in interceptions. Ken Anderson, again from 1971 to 1986, had 160 interceptions. Boomer Esiason was second. He played from 1984 to 1997, so a little overlap there. He had 131 interceptions. Let's see, look at Joe Burrow currently only has 46. He's seventh on the Cincinnati Bengals all-time interception chart, which is, of course, a stat you don't want. Now, the huge difference is where he may never catch Ken Anderson, even if he spends his entire career there, is that Ken Anderson, and this isn't actually that bad of a number, but Ken Anderson threw an interception at a 3.6% rate. Joe Burrow throws an interception at a 1.8% rate. So half of Ken Anderson's total. So it's going to be a while before Joe Burrow moves up this list. In fact, John Kitton is in sixth, and that's 13 away. So it's possible he doesn't even get that far this current season coming up in 2025. So again, even with 160 interceptions by Ken Anderson, it's nowhere near the top 10. Brett Favre holds that record with 336 interceptions in a career. So that's a stat, of course, you do not want to have. When we're looking at sacks, now Ken Anderson was sacked quite a bit. 398 sacks. Andy Dalton second with 278. Now, Joe Burrow has been sacked a fair amount with 196. That puts him at fourth behind Boomer Esiason. And again, when you look at the sack percent rate, Ken Anderson was sacked at 8.2. Joe Burrow is at a 7.1. So it's not that far off. And 7.1 is higher than Andy Dalton and Boomer Esiason's percent rate. So he gets sacked a fair amount. 7.1% is high, really, for a quarterback. Something you don't want to see when you have a star quarterback like Joe Burrow. But again, 398 sacks doesn't even put you in the top 10, even close. Aaron Rodgers currently holds that record with 571. So when we're moving off the quarterbacks and we're looking at the running backs, Corey Dillon leads the Cincinnati Bengals as far as rushing all time with 8,061 yards over James Brooks. Now, Corey Dillon, let me back up a second. Corey Dillon played from 1997 to 2003, and James Brooks played from 1984 to 1991. He had 6,447. Joe Mixon, who was with the Bengals until he moved on last year, he had 6,412. So he was really ready to, if he'd have stayed with the Bengals, he would have definitely passed Corey Dillon probably in 2 years. But he did move on. So now there's really nobody on the team. Chase Brown is 26th on the Cincinnati Bengals with 1,169 yards. So there's nobody currently who's going to be challenging the rushing leaders of the Cincinnati Bengals. And 8,000 yards, again, isn't anywhere near the all-time record. When looking at TDs, Pete Johnson was the leader with 64 touchdowns rushing. He did that from 1977 to 1983, so really not bad. Joe Mixon was second with 49, and those were the top two. And again, nowhere near. There's running backs with 100 before you get to the top 10. Interestingly, Ken Anderson as a quarterback had 20 touchdowns. But as far as players today, Chase Brown has 7. So again, there's nobody. Joe Burrow quarterback has 12. So that's it. So it's going to be a while before anybody even approaches Pete Johnson's record for the Cincinnati Bengals as far as touchdowns go. So when we're looking at receptions, of course, you've got a great player right now, the Cincinnati Bengals doing Jamar Chase, but Chad Johnson from 2001 to 2010 is the leader as far as Cincinnati Bengals go with 10,783 yards. A.J. Green is second. He played from right after him, started the year after he did, after Chad Johnson. He has from 2011 to 2020, he has 9,430 yards. So they're the top two. Now, Jamar Chase is quickly gaining on these two. He's got 5,425 yards, so he's halfway to catching Chad Johnson. He has another season. He had 1,700 yards, so he could definitely move as far as third place. So he's going to easily make a huge move up this chart. It'll be a few years, though, before he's going to catch Chad Johnson or A.J. Green, but the way he's playing right now, he has a definite good chance of becoming the leader as far as yards, touchdowns, and receptions go. So he's amazing. That was yards. Let's look at receptions. Again, Chad Johnson has 751 receptions. A.J. Green has 649. Those are still your top two. Jamar Chase is already at number 8 with 395. So he has another 100-plus receptions. He'll move up to at least 6, passing Chris Collinsworth, and could easily move up even farther than that if he can even hit the 500 reception mark. With all he needs is 105 receptions, and for him, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, these numbers, as far as career goes, aren't big numbers, but 751. Hines Ward was 15th with 1,000, so they don't rank up there. But as far as the team goes, Chad Johnson does lead with 751. But Jamar Chase, if he stays with this team, and even if he didn't, he's definitely somebody that's going to be showing up on all-time records in a few years, the way he's been catching passes. All right. As far as tight ends go in receptions for the Cincinnati Bengals, Rodney Holman from 1982 to 1992 had 318. He's the leading tight end. Had several tight ends that were fairly good and all very close. And when it comes to yards, Bob Trumpy, actually, from 1968 to 1977, had 4,600 yards. For a tight end, he averaged 15.4 yards a reception. That's impressive. I mean, Jamar Chase is averaging 13.7 as a wide receiver. So that's interesting. And when it comes to running backs and receptions, Giovanni Bernard from 2013 to 2020 had 342. He was quite a receiver out of the backfield. 342 receptions. It's really a decent amount anyway. And then the same when you're looking at the running back out of the backfield was James Brooks, actually, as far as yards go, just beating out Giovanni Bernard. James Brooks, 18th all-time with Cincinnati Bengals as far as receiving yards with 3,012. When it comes to touchdowns, Chad Johnson has 66. A.J. Green has 65. Now here's Jamar Chase again. He's 5th. So each category, whether it was yards, receptions, or TDs, now he's 5th already with 46. Isaac Curtis, who played from 1973 to 1984, has 53. Very likely that he passes him. If he had 17 again, which is what Jamar Chase had, he'd move up to 3rd, tied with 3rd with Carl Pickens, who played from 1992 to 1999. He has 63. I don't know that Jamar Chase is going to get 17 again. I mean, it's very possible. But if he does, he'll move all the way up to 3rd, from 5th to 3rd. But 2 years, you can see Jamar Chase already becoming the leading touchdown reception person for the Cincinnati Bengals. Pretty incredible. As far as tight ends go, again, Bob Trumpy had 35. Not bad. And then James Brooks had 27. Those are your top two running backs. 35 put Bob Trumpy at 10th all time for the Cincinnati Bengals, and James Brooks was 14th with his 27. So those are your leaders as far as receiving go in various categories. And again, none of those really fit anywhere near the leaders as far as all-time numbers go. And when looking at the defense, look at interceptions first, all-time. Ken Riley has 65. Now here's a guy, he played from 1969 to 1983 and 65 interceptions. Now that is a guy on the career all-time list, puts him at number 5, tied for 5th with Charles Woodson, who played from 1998 to 2015. But Ken Riley, 65 is a good number. And again, you see the years, how far back that was, that the Cincinnati Bengals did that. And usually on every team, that's the way it goes. Logan Wilson has 11. Outside linebacker for Cincinnati Bengals has 11. So that's the best. So it's going to be a while before anybody even possibly catches Ken Riley. When we're looking at tackles for loss all time, Carlos Dunlap from 2010 to 2020 just beat out Geno Atkins, same years, 2010 to 2020. Dunlap had 103, Geno Atkins had 100. Those are your top two players. So right now you've got Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, who right now is in a contract dispute at the time of this podcast. But they're your top two players. They're 6th and 7th as far as tackles for loss. Hubbard has 55 and Hendrickson has 53. So if you can get, especially Hendrickson, if getting back out there on the field, he's going to move up this list quick. He's already halfway to catching Dunlap and Atkins. So those are two to watch. And another one, Mike Hilton, has 36 tackles for loss. Again, these are numbers that don't reach the top 10 at all, but even for Dunlap and Atkins, but not bad, good numbers over that time period. And then when we look at the last career stat of sacks, Eddie Edwards from 1977 to 1988 had 84.5, and then Dunlap again had 82.5. Those are your top two sack leaders. Now, these are numbers that you would think are going to be broken sooner than later. And you do have Trey Hendrickson already with 57 sacks. He led the league last year, so you should see him moving up this list pretty quick. I mean, already he's only 27 away. Give him a couple of years. If he gets a new contract signed for a multi-year contract, you could see him becoming the number one sack leader for the Cincinnati Bengals. And those numbers don't affect the overall old-time record as far as sacks go. Bruce Smith holds that record with 200. All right, let's look at the season stats, and we'll look at the quarterbacks and the passing yards. Joe Burrow holds the top 3 spots as far as Cincinnati Bengals go. In fact, last year was his best season, pretty much every category you can think of. As far as yards, he had 4,918, just missing out. 15 times quarterbacks have hit 5,000 yards, so he just came up short of as far as that goes. So 4,918 yards. And like I said, that's number 1 for the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you're looking at the overall league last year, Joe Burrow led in yardage by almost almost 300 over Jared Goff for Detroit, who had 4,629. So Joe Burrow really had quite a season last year. And I think holding him back from Player of the Year was just the record. Cincinnati's defense, needs to improve. The offense is amazing, so we'll see how it goes in 2025. When it comes to touchdowns, Joe Burrow broke his own record, which he had set in 2022 with 35 touchdowns, and he had 43 last year. Again, quite a good amount of touchdown passes, which led the NFL again in 2024. 43 for him. Jared Goff again. No, I'm sorry. Take that back. Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson each had 41 touchdowns. So just a couple behind Joe Burrow, but he did lead again in touchdowns. So impressive. Again, like I said, he holds the top three spots as far as touchdowns go. 43 isn't enough to get you to the top three. There's 3 times quarterbacks thrown for 50 or more touchdowns. And so there's a goal for Joe Burrow. When it comes to interceptions, now again, you go back to the older players. Boomer Esiason in 1990 through 22, and John Kitna in 2001 through 22, and Ken Anderson in 1978 through 22. Those were your top 3 leaders as far as interceptions go. So Joe Burrow, he's impressive as far as interception rate goes. He threw 14 in 2021, which is the most he's thrown. Last year, he threw 9. 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. That's very impressive. Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins led the NFL with 16. So with only 9, when you throw that many touchdowns, that's really impressive, and the amount of yards he was throwing for. So as far as sacks go, now Joe Burrow is number 1, and it's not a category you want to be number 1, but he has 51 sacks in 2021. Last year, he almost had the same thing at 48. This is a stat you definitely don't want to see him up there in, and hopefully they improve that line to protect him a little bit. So he had 48 last season, which tied him for 4th. Caleb Williams had 68, so 20 more sacks for Caleb Williams. Rough year for him as a rookie. But yeah, 48 still a lot. Getting sacked at a rate of 6.86%, that's a little high. Caleb Williams, though, sacked at a rate of 10.79%. You'll be killed next year if you get that same kind of number. So that's your quarterback. Looking at the quarterbacks on a season level. All right, let's look at the rushing leaders for Cincinnati. Rudy Johnson has the top 2 spots as far as most yards in a season. 2005, he had 1,458, and in 2004, he had 1,454. Very close. That's your top 2. Corey Dillon had the next 3. So again, Joe Mixon was up there a few times. He's gone now. And so it's going to be on to Chase Brown, who had 990 yards last year, which puts him at 27th on the Cincinnati Bengals all-time list. And that's just, that's a little bit of a letdown. Hopefully we see something, an improvement in the rushing game, which would definitely help out the passing game as well. But with 990 yards, he ended up finishing 17th in the NFL as far as rushing went. So that's your yardage leader. Last for the Cincinnati Bengals as far as touchdowns go, Ickey Woods in 1988 had 15 touchdowns. Pretty good amount. Pete Johnson had 14 twice, 1979 and 1983. And then Joe Mixon was up there, but only once, really. He didn't get up there as high as far as touchdowns go, like some of the other leading running backs do. Chase Brown is Last year had his best season as far as touchdowns, but he still finished only 31st. He had 7. And with 7 in the league, he was tied for 19th in the league with Derrick Henry, Jamar Gibbs, and James Cook all having 16. So as far as that goes, the running game is not the highlight of the Cincinnati Bengals, but what is the receiving game, quarterback and receivers. So that is where you see a lot of the impressive stats. So number one all time, which was just set last year, was Jamar Chase, who had 127 receptions, which led the NFL, in fact. 127 receptions, beat out T.J. Houshmandzadeh, who in 2007 had 112. So he had had that record for 17 years before it was broken. When looking at receptions, I'm looking at the receptions now. So Jamar Chase was able to crack the top 10, just barely tying Stephon Diggs with 127, coming in at tied for 9th all time as far as receptions in a season. Michael Thomas holds a record in 2019 with the New Orleans Saints. He had 149. So, but 127 was impressive. Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Detroit Lions had 115 last season. So Jamar Chase led the NFL last season by 12 over Brown. Really impressive season. See what Chase does this year. When it comes to yards, Jamar Chase again broke his own record. In 2021, he had 1,455. He crushed that record in this past season with 1,708 yards, which again led the NFL. Just like Burrow, he had a trifecta. I mean, Jamar Chase led the NFL in receptions, yards, and TDs receiving. So really incredible season for him. So that is the record, which again gives him a spot number 14 all time. Only 14 players have had over 1,700 yards receiving, and he just broke that, or just passed that barrier. The all-time records, Calvin Johnson for the Detroit Lions in 2012 had 1,964. So 2 good years, not back to back, in 2021 and 2024 for Jamar Chase. Even in 2023 at 1,200. So as long as he stays healthy, he has a good shot at being the leading receiver in the NFL every year. Now, like I said, when it comes to touchdowns, Jamar Chase led the NFL in that as well with 17. And again, of course, that is now the new record, actually tied with Carl Pickens. Carl Pickens in 1995 had 17 touchdown receptions. That's pretty interesting. 17, which ties you for 6th all time as far as touchdown receptions go. There's quite a few players who have 17 touchdowns in a season, but Jamar Chase is right there now. Randy Moss holds the record with 23 touchdown receptions in a single season. Only 2 players, him and Jerry Rice, who had 22, have more than 20 touchdown receptions in a single season. But like I said, Jamar Chase led the NFL. Terry McLaurin had 13 playing for the Washington Commanders. That was your second best as far as touchdown receptions go. All right. When looking at the defense, let's see, Cincinnati Bengals. And with this, we're just going to look at the past season. The Cincinnati Bengals had Geno Stone had 4 interceptions. Kirby Johnson led the NFL playing for the Detroit Lions. He had 9. Looking at tackles for loss, Myles Garrett playing for the Cleveland Browns had 22. And then Trey Hendrickson was second with 19 tackles for loss. So you can see Trey Hendrickson's going to, if he can work out the contract deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, is going to be holding a lot of their records as far as sacks, tackles for loss go. So we'll see how that works itself out. But he had 19 tackles for loss. When it comes to sacks, Trey Hendrickson did lead the NFL with 17 and a half. Myles Garrett, playing for Cleveland, was second with 14. So Trey Hendrickson had an impressive season, and hopefully they can work out their contract situation and go from there. So that is your Cincinnati Bengals finishing in third place. Definitely hoping to improve. They can just get some improvement on the defense. They definitely have a chance to make the playoffs this coming year. It's a tough division. I think they'll definitely beat out the Steelers, who finished second last year, but the Ravens are going to be tough. So it's, like I said, very tough division. We'll see how it goes for them in 2025. Hope you appreciate listening to these podcasts about each team. We'll finish off the AFC North next podcast. I do have a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages you can check out, all at Just the Stats NFL. Go to that and leave a comment, a question. Appreciate it if you would like this podcast and subscribe. That helps grow it, helps me continue to try to improve as much as I can, and hopefully I will. Each podcast will be better than the last one. This is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. Until next time, I am out.